And Jancis Robinson is with us. Lovely to meet and talk with you.
It's a great pleasure to be here, Matt.
So
Thank
how
you.
many times over the years have you been here?
I've lost count. The first visit was 85.
Right.
And probably every 4 years, something like that.
And the evolution that you have seen of our wine industry you would describe as what?
Massive, absolutely massive. No doubt about it that New Zealand wine belongs in the company of, the world's great wines. But the trouble is that the market outside New Zealand probably only sees relatively inexpensive Sauvignon Blanc and thinks that that's what New Zealand's all about.
Even though our Sauvignon Blanc is inexpensive, it's still pretty good. Even a cheap bottle of Sauv.
It's fine, and it's very, very reliable. A wine nerd like me gets a bit sick of the same. There's not much variation at the bottom end of the market, so I probably wouldn't choose it because it wouldn't stimulate me. But on the other hand, the mass market loves it because it's consistent and they know exactly what they're getting.
The New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc story, especially into Britain, is as strong as ever or not?
I believe so. I don't see any weakening. Yeah.
And what is it? It's still the magic. It's still that Marlborough. No one else makes it. Its special taste.
I mean, the Chileans have had a good go at copying it. In fact, one of the people that we met on our recent tour apparently was rung by a Chilean friend just after the worst of Gabrielle had hit, saying, "Does this mean there's going to be a shortage of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc?" It's not quite as unique, perhaps, as the message gets across. You could find wines in the Loire and Chile that taste a bit like it,
right.
But because it's been so successful that they've tried to copy it.
Without getting too political about it, have we been slightly lazy over the years in our messaging in the sense that we've relied so heavily on Sauvignon Blanc because it is so successful and brings in so much money? The nuanced stories of some of the stuff we do, like the Syrahs of Hawke's Bay, the Pinots of certain parts of the country, haven't quite got the traction they might have.
I think that's a fair comment. Probably one has to add that the best wines of New Zealand are made in reasonably small quantities. But then the best wines of most places are made in reasonably small quantities, apart from Bordeaux. But no, I think that those promoting New Zealand wine have a responsibility to widen the picture and make it more interesting and make it appeal to people who are prepared to pay quite a lot for wine, not just to those who will buy something inexpensive.
This is the thing that's always fascinated me about wine. I mean, and Bordeaux's your classic example. People are prepared to pay, clearly, astonishing amounts of money.
Quite astonishing. But as the world produces more and more billionaires need billionaires' drinks, and if it's billed as a trophy wine, even if it's made in, 100,000 cases, they'll go for it.
Yeah. So could we, the reason I'm asking the question from the outside looking in, could we produce a wine in terms of just sheer quality, along with the story from where it came, that it could attract serious money?
I think so. And I going around the country, looking at prices, I think some of your best wines are actually underpriced.
Yeah. I've always argued that. The problem with arguing that is that you get down to the discussion with wine, the moment you go over a certain level, people then start to think you're a snob. And so therefore you talk about $100 bottles of wine, $200 bottles of wine, and because most people don't drink them, therefore you can't talk about it, therefore we'll get back to the $12.99 special. That must be part of the problem, mustn't it?
It may be a problem in New Zealand, but there are masses of people outside New Zealand who are looking for places to put lots of money into wine. And if we could get the message out that New Zealand's producing some stuff of interest to them, that would help everybody, I think.
And of course, it's not. It's got to be about quality for a place like New Zealand as opposed to quantity. We will never compete in quantity.
No, but you're making a good fist of it in terms of volumes exported to the US now and the UK.
What have you seen in the 2 weeks that you've been in the country in terms of the weather and the season? Because the northern part of the country has been dreadful. The summer's been dreadful in general. What about the rest of the country?
Certainly central, where I was yesterday and day before, is wallowing in a fantastic season and feeling a bit guilty about it because we all know how terrible things are, especially Gisborne and Hawke's Bay in terms of wine regions. I think in Marlborough, it's fine. They've had it. It's been a bit cloudy and a little bit drizzly, but they'll churn it out.
Like they always do.
Yes.
Like
But mind you, I will say that spent 3 nights in Marlborough, and I tasted a lot of Sauvignon Blanc, and every single one was interesting. And I used to. There's that particular flavour that I call canned asparagus.
Yes.
That you associate with the mass market Sauvignon Blanc. And I suddenly realised, somebody mentioned it at the end of my 3 days, that not in any one of the Sauvignons that I tasted had I got that flavour. They were all much more interesting and nuanced. And some of them were going to age quite well as well.
Fantastic. Let's talk wine generally. Organics. Any future? Is it a big deal? Does it change your market?
It's a worthwhile thing to do because we need to save the planet, as everyone in New Zealand knows all too well now. And, crazy to be using pesticides and things that are completely ruining the soil. I think there is an increasing emphasis now, not necessarily on what's going on above the ground, but what's going on underneath the ground, and realizing that soil health is a major thing. And if you're just killing your soil by adding chemical inputs, then we've got no future for agriculture, really. So I had one of the most interesting tastings that I did in this last 2 weeks was 2 wine glasses with soil in each. And one was soil from a conventionally farmed vineyard, with all the chemical inputs, which really didn't smell of much and looked very dull, sort of mildly dusty. And one from a biodynamically farmed vineyard, which is one step on from organics, tending every single vine. And the smell just bounded out of the glass, and it looked so much more interesting, had little fragments of vine roots in it, and we didn't actually see an earthworm, but we could have done. Apparently, the number of earthworms per cubic meter is a major measure, a metric of how healthy your soil is.
Fantastic. Climate, then, seeing you introduce it, how radical do you think will be? I mean, that great debate of southern New Zealand, central Otago, when we first planted grapes there, everyone thought we were mad. And apparently with climate change now, you'll be growing Bordeaux in England before you know it. How much change is coming, do you think, realistically?
Oh, it's changing so obviously, so rapidly. I mean, just looking at harvest dates, everybody pretty much is picking 2 weeks earlier than they used to. That's just a very easily quantifiable measure. They're making wine now in Norway. Can you believe that?
What do they make?
They're planted Pinot Noir, which occasionally they manage to ripen and pick off before the birds get at it. Yeah. So it's not going to challenge Nuit Saint-Georges and whatever, but they're growing it all over Scandinavia now. Incredible. I mean that would have been unthinkable 20 years ago.
Alcohol generally, in terms of young people, I've got 5 of them. Their attitude to alcohol, I mean, they all go through their periods of going to a party and all that crap. But the amount I drink and have, and I suspect you too, is that a problem for the wine industry as people turn away from alcohol?
I think it is. I mean, I've been writing about wine for more than 40 years. And all that time, the wine industry has worried about young people's attitude to wine and will they get it and get into it. And this is the first time that I think those worries are justified because there is just so much competition. There's teetotalism, which is a major factor, health drinks, cocktails, craft beer, all sorts of interesting spirits now, because the spirit market used to be very boring, didn't it? Just had a few big brands. So there are a lot of challenges for wine today.
Jeez. I enjoy having wine simply because just to collect it. I get as much enjoyment out of having it as a collection as I do of drinking it. Is that weird?
I don't think it is at all. I think, people like you have case after case stashed away, and it's giving them an immense amount of pleasure.
Yeah.
But the only downside of that is I think quite a lot of wine is kept too long.
Yes. Yeah, I'd agree with that. The thing, the fact, I don't even know that it's a fact. Stephen Spurrier claims he's drunk about a bottle a day for most of his life.
Michael Broadbent of Christie's, who started up wine auctions in London, he said that he drank about a bottle a day. But he always claimed that he had what do you call it, a mimosa, orange juice and champagne for breakfast.
Right.
So he got off to a sort of early start.
But how much do you drink a day? In terms, are you a drinker per se, or is it?
I see there's a huge difference between tasting and
of
drinking, and I spend a lot of my days tasting, but
Right.
it doesn't put me off drinking and enjoying wine in the evening. And it's a daily pleasure, I'm afraid.
How much? Well, don't say afraid, because it's a daily pleasure. How much of what you have done and do is art versus science, in terms of your writing, understanding of the wine, the tasting of it, the nuance, the subtlety?
I think science has become more and more important in writing about wine. In the old days, the old wine writers, they didn't know how wine was made. They didn't know the names of grapes, It was lyrical phrases and things. And now you can't really survive unless you understand science and keep up to date with all the advances that there are. I feel quite ashamed that I'm so old that I never actually made wine. I've never made a drop of wine. But any newcomer into wine writing, I think, would have to go and do an internship somewhere.
Fantastic. In summation, from your point of view, and going back to what we were talking about with New Zealand's wine industry, of all the people who make wine these days, where do we sit in terms of, if you asked 100 people randomly, pick a country, who's doing well, tell me about their story, what are you most impressed with? Where do we sit in that?
Well, New Zealand's quite recently onto the international market, apart from the UK, isn't it? So you probably wouldn't find a huge amount, even though America is now importing even more from New Zealand than the UK is, you probably wouldn't find all that many Americans really understanding New Zealand wine. I suppose Europe's going to come first, because it's just been doing it for longer, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, listen, I hope you've enjoyed your stay.
Very much so, thank you.
And good to talk and meet with you.
Lovely, thank you.
The Mike Hosking Breakfast, 6 to 9 weekdays on Newstalk ZB.